Farm Baby. Last video was about Kanye. This video is about trolls. So, how this is gonna go? This is the first, I guess, technically. This Kanye video wasn't the first one. This is the first in the series of videos where I talk about some stones, some boulders that my God told me that I needed to remove from in front of my tomb. That is what the rest of phase one of this project is. Me removing stones, boulders from in front of my tomb. They're gonna go in backwards chronological order. So the most recent one that I noticed and really locked in on, all the way back to the very first thing that I needed to excavate, I guess, right? So this is probably gonna be like the lightest weight one, maybe. How did I get here? So during the Drake and Kendrick beef, I've been, consuming lots of YouTube anyway, because, that's what you do before you start a YouTube channel a lot of times. And I hadn't been like a commenter on anything in years. Been like a really long time since I felt the need to leave a comment. But then the best thing that ever happened. And so I was like, this would be a great opportunity for me to practice how I want to engage with, other commenters as I prepare to, become a creator. And I learned some things about myself. And some of them didn't feel real great. So the way this is gonna go is I'm gonna tell you, what I learned about myself. And then I am going to try to marry my ego and my higher self, right? And, so like removing all these stones is like ego death, shadow work. I'm not gonna go through a dark night of the soul, because I'm too healed from these things to go through that much emotion. But these are ego deaths, and especially because I'm, trying to do them in a way I can share them with other people, what it might look like to, actually challenge yourself in that way. So ego death, okay, so I'm not talking to anybody who actually knows what ego deaths and shadow work are. Like, obviously, you guys don't need an explanation. You'll pick it up just from seeing it. But I know that there are a lot of people that see these terms and haven't necessarily experienced it, or worse, there are people that see these terms and think that you have an ego death, like you have one time that your ego dies and now you've ascended and now it's high vibrations only, positive vibes only, love and light only. That's a fed up. That's a video for another day. For me, right, my ego is like my plaintiff's attorney, right? Like my ego is like what my client not gonna do and what my client deserves is, and that's my ego. My ego is my first reaction, especially when triggered, right? Like when something hits, an unhealed spot, right? That my ego's reactions, first reaction, it's not necessarily what comes out because, we've been working on me. But my ego is my plaintiff's attorney, which means that whatever, is coming in that's causing like the egoic reaction is like the accuser, which is also the name of a certain biblical figure, right? And so those two are in conflict. But then my higher self is more like the adjudicator, the mediator, right? Like it's a whole lot of, but you know better. Like, is that helpful? Was that necessary? Or could you go, could you be more constructive, right? And so what I want to do, once I tell you why I feel like I need to do this, what I want to do is kind of show the example of like what my ego would say versus what my higher self would say now. The other thing we need to know is because I'm in active manifesting, co-creating mode right now, very, very intensely focused. And like my spirit team is like real, real busy kind of moving some things. I'm not doing baneful magic right now. Like I'm kind of like saving all of my non-positive, non-elevating requests. I'm kind of setting them all aside, for like one specific thing. So I'm trying to only do like protection and elevation and like spells of increase. So I want to try to exemplify what my ego would say, check it with my higher self, and then if I get to a good spot, then give a spell I can cast on trolls because I can't cuss them because they're too unimportant. So, how did I get here? That was a lot. How did I get here? So during the Drake Kendrick Weave, I'm on every video, commenting on everything, right? And the first thing I noticed where I had to check myself was, okay, there's a lot of bot or bot-like comments for the side that blew up inorganically, right? And so I was like, what? I don't view myself as a person that argues with bots. Like, what I look like arguing with a bot. And so like that was my ego. My higher self was like, but you probably have argued with bot energy, right? Like even if it wasn't, anything kind of automated, even if it was just because like if you were on YouTube like heavy during that week, right? Because it really was just a week. If you were on YouTube heavy during that week, you probably saw a lot of the same commenters, with an agenda, right? And they kind of like moved in packs, and they would have like similar, name structures, right? And so that was like a whole thing. Like that was a whole, I suspect, allegedly, I think, it's just my opinion, man, but I don't know for sure, pay for a campaign, right? And so like my higher self was like, at some point you probably did. So how do you, make sure you're mindful of that going forward? So that was one thing. Another thing was based on the way that some of the, antagonistic, because I don't typically watch things that I don't, like, I live in a bubble. I don't care to watch things that are going to make me mad. So I'm mostly watching things that are going to reinforce my biases. That is very intentional. That's a video for another day. So I was doing that, and I noticed that some of the like negative comments or, kind of counter comments, they seemed young, but in a way that you couldn't tell for sure. Like it wasn't young like this is a child, but it would be stuff like, I don't give a F about culture. That sounds like an early 20-something who's maybe 40-something parent didn't really teach them anything about the music of this culture, or they're from outside of the culture, right? And so then it started being comments like that where, or even stuff like, Drake was the best rapper alive, and it was clear, like, based on like other things they were saying, that like they really didn't listen to rap. So like stuff like that was like very, very young and or outsider-ish. And I was like, my ego was like, man, I don't argue with children. I don't like what? I don't like arguing with children on the internet. But the internet it's flattened that communication, and so there is a wide range of, there's a wide age range engaging. But then the other part of it, and people have seen this stat floating around, is that like something like 60% of the population doesn't read above a sixth grade level. And so then you get into like that thing, and that's even more challenging because a lot of people's default when they, see certain tells, sometimes it's grammatical, sometimes it's, you know, just references, whatever it is, there's a lot of like, you're too dumb for me to argue with. And I gotta work through that. And so the thing that actually made me like stop commenting as much, the thing that I did that made me stop commenting as much, period. And then by like, because they were like all the analysis videos for like months afterwards. So by about September 11th, when Watch the Party Die came out, I had like, just drastically fallen off. But what happened that like led to that was, I don't know, well, I know his fans remember, but from a lot of people don't like really remember that Eminem like dropped in the middle of all this. And Eminem has a very like unique fan base in that, much like Drake, is a lot of people that don't actually like rap or hip hop. But unlike Drake, Eminem is much more respectful of the culture that he's in than his fan base, right? And so there was like, I was having like that kind of conversation on like an Eminem video, and basically I could tell from the first comment that I was like engaging with that this was somebody who did not speak English as a first language and was probably very young and, primarily consumed this culture from the standpoint of, I look like y'all, but Eminem is the best rapper alive, right? It's a whole thing. Like it's a whole thing. And I remember that like after like, kind of going back and forth for a few exchanges, me eventually being like, you are so disconnected from my culture. You have no idea what things you said in your first comment that led me to get you to this place. And I was like, I don't like it. So that started the thought process, right? Of like, okay, it's one thing to like, be in the mix as another commenter. It's another thing to be a content creator, and recognizing that trolls and bad faith and just generally annoying, like not terribly well thought out or whatever comments are free energy source. Like they're like, I can block all day on, platforms that I'm not using, but for YouTube, like if it's not a straight up like spam bot, then it's free labor, it's free motion. And how do I engage with that in a way that, for as much as I would like to block them out, how can I instead engage with them in a way that either just takes advantage of the free labor or could potentially reflect something more back to them, especially the ones that are like not just pure trolling, but are just maybe like kind of bad faith, right? So that's how we got here. Me judging me about being nasty. And I needed always being nasty, just like just needing to think first. And so the other thing is, nasty comments, like negative comments on anything, are rarely creative. And to be honest, a lot of positive comments aren't either, right? Like there's like a narrow amount of commenting on the internet that is like enhancing the conversation in some way. But like there are some things that can just be assumed, right? So I could just assume that if I am a woman on the internet and I say something that a man disagrees with, my physical appearance is going to be attacked, right? So the kind of men that do that, we've also all kind of generally agreed to like what their like day-to-day life looks like, right? And so like my ego wants to be like, I can't argue with a man who has not brought as many women to see stars with their eyes closed as I have. Like, I can't, you can't make me feel any type of way. But my higher self is like, first of all, it's toxic as hell. That is patriarchal thinking. You can't reduce a man's worthiness to comment to his ability to provide gratification to a woman, even though the whole point of attacking my appearance, if I'm expressing an opinion that he doesn't like, is because he ain't got nobody laid up under him, willingly at least. So, what would be better? A comment on my appearance can't come at his manhood. So, maybe my higher self would ask him, what's the last video of a woman commentating on something? Make sure that we don't get into corn territory, right? What's the last video you saw of a woman giving her opinion that you actually liked? Because, harvest the labor, but also, like get something out of it. So that would be a better higher self one. Now, the spell I would cast on that sort of comment would probably be something along the lines of, may you have all of the attention from women you respect that you deserve. Because we're not going to go too far. We're not just going to be putting, people in the line of fire. However much he deserves, that's what I want him to have. And so now we have said what I really want to say. And said what would be better. And now we've offered a blessing. Okay, we're moving positive energy. All right. If I, as a witch, right, if I say anything about religion, especially, Christianity, dominant religion, I can guarantee that somebody that looks like me is going to call it demonic. And the movie Sinners is out right now. So, that's being proven that there's really been a number done on a lot of our minds that anything that predated our forced labor is demonic. Now, my ego really wants to say, pray against me. Pray against me. I dare you. But that's not kind, because that's not a good idea. And I know that's not a good idea. Like, they don't. Like, I could say pray for me, you know what I'm saying? But like, I can't say like, pray against me. Can't do that. So, I could say pray for me. I could ask them, how many demons have you actually seen? There's a lot of talk going around right now on social media about the fact that like people are starting to realize that the people that call everything demonic tend to be like the worst people. Like, they are the demons to people in their lives. Terrible humans. And so that would, be effective if I just want to shut conversation down. But I think my higher self would really just prefer that I just keep asking why. Like, just keep trying to like pull, because oftentimes it's unfortunately from a very shallow, narrow base of information and life experience. But also, if I'm being really, really honest, some people might actually have had demon ancestors. Like they might have had terrible people in their family that they should not be connecting with. Or on the other hand, and this is why I don't want to automatically, jump to anything toxic that my ego might want to say. On the other hand, they might have come from practitioners 2 generations ago, 3 generations ago, that were persecuted in some way beyond everything else we had going on. Or, even if they're like first gen, right, or first second gen, right, like they might have come from traditional or indigenous practitioners of some sort and been persecuted. And so like the epigenetic, like DNA level trauma that's been passed down is, oh, we don't do that because it resulted in something tragic, right? So I don't want to just automatically tell people they ignorant as hell and I dare them to pray for me, right? Pray against me. So the spell I could cast would be something like, I don't want to invite, I don't want to invite anybody to them either. May the angels help you expand your consciousness of the richness of our culture, right? We get to that. We can give them that blessing. May the angels do it. Just leave it with the angels. The angels help you expand your consciousness of our culture. That's fair, right? Anything that triggers any stand group. My ego is always gonna want to ask, how much was your check last month? Like, how much was your check for this work last month? Always. Because it's just like, whew. Parasociality is very, very interesting phenomenon. Yeah, ego want to say something slick like that, but higher self would probably prefer that I engage. Yeah, higher self would prefer I say something more like, what in your life do you feel like I'm judging by whatever comment I made about, their fave, right? What would be a good spell to cast on them? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to help stand. I don't know how to help stand. Honestly, I would just wish them to have a better day than whatever I brought out of them, because like I'm gonna have to give that one some thought, because they are rampant. Even like my favorite artists, my favorite female artists, my favorite male artists don't have stands. Not like that. My favorite female artists though, sheesh, people get weird. Yeah, we're just gonna not be overly antagonistic to their comments, and instead just invite them to consider how it affects them personally. What other assumptive comments can we make? Presumptive comments. Listen, when I make a video talking about politics, or even just talking about, well, being black is political, but if anybody who ain't us come through, I'm gonna let my ego do whatever she want to do. Like, I'm not going to, no blessings, no higher self, right? Yeah, nah, whatever happens. So yeah, so that's my shadow work for trolls. There, you get the point basically. Like I don't have to go through every example. You get the point that basically like people are just not that original, and I don't want to lose out on that free labor, but I also would like to transmute, right, any negative energy from my free labor source into something that could be, if not uplifting, at least slightly more positive. How do I feel about that, Boulder? Pretty good. I think I'll do okay with that. Let's move the rest. Thanks for coming. Bye.